The frozen lake stretched out endlessly, a pristine expanse of white and ice shimmering under the soft glow of the morning sun. The biting chill in the air was sharp enough to nip at exposed skin, yet it carried a peculiar stillness that brought a sense of calm. A lone figure trudged across the snow-covered surface, pulling a sled stacked with gear. Their breath rose in faint, misty clouds, a subtle reminder of the cold's relentless grip. Each step crunched against the snow, the sound reverberating in the vast, quiet wilderness. After scouting for the perfect spot, they stopped near an area where the ice had a faint transparency, revealing a dark abyss below. The tools were unpacked with deliberate precision: an ice auger, a fishing rod, a tackle box, and a small thermos of steaming liquid. With a swift, practiced motion, the auger was driven into the ice, spiraling down as it carved out a circular hole. The grinding sound of metal against ice broke the silence, echoing across the lake. Soon, a neat opening revealed the black, frigid water beneath, small shards of ice floating on its surface. The figure paused, crouching to inspect the hole. A gloved hand swept away stray ice chunks, and a brief moment was taken to appreciate the sheer thickness of the frozen surface. It was a marvel of nature, strong enough to hold a person's weight, yet fragile enough to shatter with the right force. They reached for the fishing rod, carefully baiting the hook with practiced ease. The line descended slowly into the water, vanishing into the darkness below. Sitting back on a portable stool, they waited, the rod propped up against their knee. Time seemed to stretch as the world stood still. The air was heavy with silence, interrupted only by the occasional creak of the ice shifting beneath. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the snow. A light wind picked up, brushing against their layered clothing. The thermos was opened, releasing a plume of steam as they poured a small cup of coffee, the warmth a welcome contrast to the frigid air. Despite the serenity, there was an underlying tension, a sense of something lying dormant beneath the surface. The ice seemed alive in its own way, with faint patterns forming and shifting as the temperature fluctuated. The figure's gloved hands adjusted the line every few minutes, ensuring it remained taut. The weight required patience, a test of endurance as much as skill. Then came a sound, soft at first, almost imperceptible. It wasn't the wind or the natural groaning of the ice. It was faint but distinct, like a muffled knock echoing from below. They paused, their head tilting slightly as if to confirm the noise. It came again, clearer this time, a rhythmic tap against the icy barrier. Their eyes scanned the surface, but there was nothing to see. The sound faded, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Shrugging off the unease, they focused back on the rod, adjusting their grip. Minutes passed, then a sudden, subtle movement caught their attention. The line twitched, barely noticeable but enough to stir excitement. They leaned forward, hands steady as they waited for another sign. The rod jerked slightly, then went still. Another moment passed, and then the line pulled taut, sending a jolt through their hands. They reacted instantly, grabbing the rod and giving a quick tug to set the hook. The fight had begun. Whatever was on the other end was strong, pulling with a force that sent a thrill coursing through their veins. The rod bent under the strain, the reel spinning as the line was dragged deeper into the abyss. They held firm, adjusting their stance on the slippery surface. The thrill of the catch began to overpower the cold. The fish on the other end was no ordinary one. It had weight, strength, and determination. For a brief moment, they felt as if they were battling the very essence of the lake itself. The struggle was on, and the outcome was uncertain. The line trembled in the cold, the tension building with each passing second. The protagonists gripped the rod with both hands, adjusting their stance as the line pulled with incredible force. There was no mistaking it now. A massive fish had taken the bait. The pull was relentless, as if the creature beneath the ice was determined to escape. The rod bent sharply under the strain, its tip dipping toward the frozen surface. Every few seconds, the line twitched and the reel hummed, the sound of it slicing through the cold air. The fish was moving fast, darting this way and that beneath the ice. The protagonist's heart raced, adrenaline flooding their veins as they fought to maintain control. Sweat beaded on their brow despite the frigid temperature. Their fingers tightened around the rod, the cold metal biting into their skin, but they didn't dare let go. The fish, whatever it was, seemed intent on testing their strength and resolve. Each time they thought they had gained some ground, the fish surged, pulling the line further into the depths. The struggle felt endless, like a battle with no clear end in sight. The cold wind cut through the air, swirling around them as they focused entirely on the task at hand. The ice beneath their boots creaked as they shifted their weight, trying to steady themselves against the force pulling from below. The rod buckled again, and with a swift motion, the protagonist reeled it in a few more inches, hoping to gain a slight advantage. It felt like an eternal tug-of-war, an unseen enemy testing their endurance. Then, with a sudden jolt, the line went slack. The protagonist froze, eyes narrowing as they waited for the next movement. Had the fish gotten away? Had it broken free of the hook? They remained still, not daring to make a move. The seconds stretched long, the silence almost unbearable. Then, just as suddenly, the line tugged again, harder this time, as though the fish was angry at being pulled. They could feel the surge through the rod, a brief moment of panic rising before they quickly regained composure. The line had tightened once more, pulling steadily as the fish began to circle beneath the ice. They could almost feel it moving, a massive shadow beneath the surface. It seemed to hesitate, perhaps sensing the struggle above, but the pull continued, now slower, more deliberate. The protagonist's muscles burned with the effort. The reel whined as it slowly turned, inching the line back toward the hole. Each movement was calculated, each turn of the reel deliberate. The surface of the ice was eerily still, the only sound coming from the faint whine of the line being reeled in. The protagonist's breath came in shallow bursts, their hands frozen to the rod, yet they couldn't stop now. There was too much at stake, too much at risk. They leaned forward, eyes scanning the hole, searching for any glimpse of the fish. The struggle had become a test of willpower. The fish fought back harder, almost as if it were challenging them, refusing to give in. A wave of frustration swept over the protagonist as they felt the line slipping again. They weren't going to let it go. Not this time. The fish was close, so close that they could almost feel its presence beneath the ice. The ice creaked as they shifted again, positioning themselves for the final phase of the fight. The fish surged forward, the line stretching taut once more, but they had learned its rhythm. With a swift jerk, they reeled in quickly, hoping to keep the fish from escaping again. Then, just as they thought they had it in their grasp, the fish made a powerful lunge, darting toward the depths with shocking speed. The rod bent further, threatening to snap. The protagonists gritted their teeth, desperately trying to regain control. They tightened their grip on the rod, planting their feet firmly against the ice as they fought to keep the fish from breaking free. Their muscles ached, but they knew this was the moment. The struggle intensified, the fish pulling harder with each second. They could hear the ice shifting beneath them as they leaned back, trying to maintain their balance. With a swift tug, they adjusted the angle, pulling in once again. The rod buckled under the pressure, but they refused to let go. Sweat stung their eyes, but they blinked it away, focused entirely on the battle below the ice. The line was growing shorter now, inch by inch. The fish, clearly exhausted from its fierce struggle, seemed to slow. The protagonist's grip tightened on the rod, each movement measured and deliberate. They could sense the fish's fatigue, its once violent pulls growing weaker. But it was still dangerous, still unpredictable. A single misstep could mean losing the catch. The fish made one final, desperate attempt to flee, surging toward the depths once more. But this time, the protagonist was ready. With a quick motion, they reeled in with all their strength, pulling the fish toward the surface. The rod strained under the force, but the fish was near, so close now. They felt a sudden surge of hope, the end of the struggle in sight. The line, once taut with tension, suddenly surged upward as the fish broke the surface of the ice. A massive splash echoed across the frozen expanse, and the protagonist's heart skipped a beat as they laid eyes on the creature beneath the hole. The fish was unlike anything they had ever seen, a shimmering giant, its scales glistening with an ethereal glow in the dimming light. It was massive, its body twisting and thrashing with powerful movements, struggling against the confines of the small hole. The protagonist gasped, eyes widening in awe. This wasn't just any catch. This was something extraordinary. The fish's size was nothing short of legendary. Its scales reflected the fading light, flashing in a mesmerizing array of silvery blues and greens. Every movement seemed to create ripples in the ice, a reminder of the power this creature possessed. For a moment, the protagonist forgot the cold, the effort, the struggle. It was all worth it to witness this creature emerge from the depths. Yet the fight was far from over. The fish's enormous body continued to thrash violently, sending waves of water splashing against the ice. The protagonists quickly adjusted their grip, steadying the rod and bracing themselves for what was to come. They knew this was no ordinary fish. It would require all their skill, all their strength to reel it in. The battle that had raged beneath the surface was now taking on a new intensity, one that tested every ounce of patience and determination they had. With a firm grip on the rod, the protagonist gave a sharp pull, guiding the fish closer to the hole. The fish resisted, jerking violently, pulling the line taut once more. Every movement of the fish felt like a force of nature, and the protagonist struggled to maintain control. The cold wind seemed to grow sharper as they fought to keep the fish from escaping, the rod bending under the strain. Their muscles burned with the effort, but they held on, their eyes fixed on the prize just inches away. The fish swam in powerful circles, pulling the line deeper into the water with each turn. The protagonist's heart raced as they leaned into the struggle, adjusting their stance and reeling in as much line as they could. The fish was massive, its body sleek and powerful, almost unreal in its size. It darted toward the depths, but the protagonists kept pace, using every bit of their strength to reel it back toward the surface. It was a test of wills now, a silent battle between the protagonist and this magnificent creature. As the minutes dragged on, the fight showed no signs of slowing. The fish continued to resist, but the protagonist was relentless. Their grip on the rod never wavered, each movement deliberate and calculated. The cold had long since numbed their fingers, but the thrill of the fight kept them focused. The fish's struggle was an incredible testament to its power, but the protagonist was determined. They had come too far, fought too hard, to let it slip away now. The giant fish's head finally broke the surface again, and this time it stayed there, its powerful body wriggling just beneath the hole. It was so large that the hole in the ice seemed almost too small to contain it. The protagonist's breath caught in their throat. They had seen plenty of big fish before, but nothing like this. This one was a true marvel, its body rippling with strength and life. It looked as though it belonged to another world, a creature of myth and legend. The protagonist's pulse quickened, and for a moment they felt a deep sense of awe, as if they were witnessing something extraordinary, something few would ever experience. With a final, determined pull, the fish broke free of the water entirely, flopping heavily against the ice. The protagonists stumbled back, nearly losing their footing as the creature thrashed in the cold air. It was more than they had expected. A fish so massive, it seemed to defy nature itself. The sheer size of it left the protagonist breathless. They had caught it, but the question now was what to do with it. The fish was so large it seemed almost out of place in the small hole it had emerged from. Its vast body sprawled across the ice in an almost unnatural way. The protagonists knelt beside it, their breath fogging in the freezing air as they took in the creature's beauty. Its scales glimmered in the fading light, shimmering in an array of colors that seemed to change with every angle. The fish's eyes stared up at them, its massive body twitching weakly. Despite its size, The protagonist could sense the fragility beneath the power, the delicate balance between life and death that every creature in the wild had to contend with. The fish's mouth opened and closed weakly, and for a brief moment, the protagonist felt a surge of respect for the creature. This wasn't just a victory. It was a connection to something far greater, something untouched by human hands. With trembling hands, they gently touched the fish, feeling its smooth, cool skin beneath their gloved fingers. The fish was alive, but it wouldn't last long in this harsh environment. There was no time to waste. The protagonist hesitated for only a moment before making the decision to release the fish back into the lake. It had fought so valiantly, and it deserved to return to the wild, to continue its journey beneath the ice. Taking a deep breath, the protagonist carefully lifted the fish, cradling its enormous body in their arms. The creature's muscles twitched as they lowered it toward the hole in the ice. The protagonist's heart pounded, their mind racing. They had made a choice, one that went beyond the thrill of the catch, beyond the conquest. This was about something more, something deeper. They gently placed the fish back into the water, watching as it vanished into the depths, disappearing from sight with a final flick of its tail. The lake was quiet once more, the fish returning to its home, leaving behind only the ripples in the icy water. The protagonist stood, their hearts still pounding from the struggle, but now filled with a deep sense of awe and satisfaction. They had caught something extraordinary, and they had let it go. They knew this was a rare experience, one they would never forget. And as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the frozen lake in a golden glow, they felt a quiet sense of gratitude for the entire experience. The protagonist stood still for a moment, gazing at the ripples that slowly faded from the lake's surface. The fish, once a massive and powerful force, was now gone, back beneath the ice where it belonged. The cold had a way of making everything feel surreal, as if time itself had slowed down to allow this one rare moment to linger. A sense of peace settled over the protagonist. They didn't need to look back at the hole. They knew the fish was gone, and in its place was something more profound, an unspoken understanding between them and the wild, a quiet respect for the strength of nature. Packing up the gear was a slow, deliberate process. The fishing rod was carefully reeled in, the line slowly winding back into its spool, the bait discarded with a soft flick. Every movement was precise, as though the protagonist was reluctant to disturb the tranquility that had settled around them. The auger was pulled from the ice with a sharp twist, the hole now sealed by the frozen surface, a testament to the brief battle fought just moments ago. The sled was packed with practiced efficiency, the thermos carefully placed back inside. The weight of the moment hung in the air, but the work continued, unaffected by the quiet reverence that had taken root in the protagonist's heart. They paused for a moment, standing tall and taking in the vast, untouched landscape. The sun had dipped low, casting a golden light that seemed to stretch forever across the endless snow. The horizon was painted in shades of orange and purple, the cold air carrying a sharp edge as the light faded. The world felt still, frozen in time, with only the faintest sound of ice shifting in the distance. It was a solitude unlike any other, a place where the noise of the world was distant, and only the wind and the heartbeat of the earth could be heard. The protagonist felt small in this vast expanse, yet they also felt connected to it in a way that words could never express. The lake, the ice, the fish, it all seemed part of a greater whole, something beyond understanding. As they took one last look at the spot where the fish had been released, a thought crossed their mind. The lake held more secrets than they could ever know. There were likely more creatures lurking beneath its frozen surface, waiting to be discovered. Some would be caught, and others would slip away, vanishing into the depths without a trace. This was the nature of fishing, of life itself, full of uncertainty, yet always offering the promise of something more. The fish they had caught today was just one chapter in a much larger story, a reminder that there was always more to learn, more to experience. The wind picked up slightly, sending a chill through the protagonist's layers of clothing. They adjusted their coat, tightening it against the cold, and turned to face the journey back. The sled was heavy with the weight of the gear, but it seemed lighter now, the task at hand more of a quiet ritual than a chore. The ice beneath their boots creaked as they took the first step, the sound a reminder of the world they were leaving behind, the world where the fish swam freely beneath the ice. Each step felt deliberate, like a final acknowledgement of the day's events. They didn't hurry. There was no rush. The journey back wasn't just about leaving the lake. It was about carrying with them the lessons of the day, the quiet satisfaction of having faced a challenge head-on and come out with a story to tell. With each step, the landscape grew more expansive, the quiet solitude of the lake stretching out behind them. They passed over the same frozen expanse they had walked before, but it felt different now, imbued with a sense of completion. The lake had given them a glimpse into something bigger, something far beyond the fish they had caught. It was a reminder of how small they were in the grand scheme of things, how little control they truly had over the forces of nature. Yet, at the same time, it was a reminder of how deeply connected they were to it all. The lake had offered up its treasure, and in return, they had treated it with respect. It was an unspoken bond, one that transcended words or actions. As the final stretch of the journey unfolded, the sound of the ice beneath their feet became more pronounced, the occasional crack echoing across the otherwise silent landscape. The wind howled now, a reminder of the unforgiving cold that surrounded them, but the protagonist was undeterred. The sled rolled smoothly behind them, the weight of the task growing lighter with every step. They were almost at the edge of the lake now, the end of the journey in sight. Yet they still couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted within them. The experience had changed them, in ways they couldn't fully understand, but they knew it had left its mark. At the edge of the frozen lake, the last of the light was fading, the shadows lengthening and stretching. The ice behind them was undisturbed, the hole from earlier already sealed by the freezing surface. The fish was long gone, and the day was slipping into night. There was no fanfare, no dramatic conclusion to the tale. Instead, there was only the quiet satisfaction of having lived a moment, of having experienced something rare and remarkable. The protagonist had faced the elements, had caught a fish like no other, and had let it go with grace. As they reached the final steps, the lake lay behind them, a quiet, frozen expanse that seemed to hold more secrets than they could ever uncover. And with one last glance over their shoulder, the protagonist knew that the lake would always be there, waiting to offer up more mysteries, more stories. The fish, the battle, the release. It was all part of the same cycle, the endless rhythm of nature. And though they were leaving for now, the lake would remain unchanged and eternal.